I want you to picture two very different mountains.
Good.
On the first mountain, you have this grand, imposing royal throne of an ancient empire.
Right, like a real seat of power.
Exactly. It's surrounded by towering monuments, ziggurats reaching up into the sky, and justice is being handed down by a king who is sitting high above everyone else.
Yeah?
But here is the terrifying catch about that justice. It is entirely ruthlessly based on your social class.
Totally.
Like, if you are wealthy or if you have royal blood, the law wraps around you like a protective shield.
It protects you.
Right. But if you're at the bottom of the pyramid,
Yeah.
you're basically just an economic unit, like a piece of property.
Just a cog in the machine.
Yeah. Now, I want you to shift your gaze to a second mountain.
Okay, panning over.
This one is a rugged, barren desert peak, Mount Sinai.
Wow, yeah, quite the contrast.
And on this mountain, there is no human king. There are no ziggurats. Instead, a god who has just miraculously rescued a massive nation of slaves, well, he speaks directly to them in the wilderness. And he offers a law that treats the native-born elite and the wandering foreigner with the exact same inherent dignity.
The contrast is just jarring, isn't it? I mean, when you put those two images side by side.
It really is.
And what we really have to wrap our minds around is that the people standing at the foot of that second mountain, the Israelites, trembling out there in the desert, they had just come from a world completely governed by the logic of that first mountain.
Oh, absolutely.
That hierarchical, status-obsessed worldview. I mean, that was the water they were swimming in. It was all they knew.
And that is exactly the world we are stepping into today. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are looking at an absolutely fascinating stack of sources today. Historical translations, archaeological notes, and some really profound theological analysis of a 4,000-year-old Babylonian stone pillar.
The famous Code of Hammurabi.
Yes, the Code of Hammurabi. And we are going to place that ancient stone right next to the Mosaic Law, specifically the Covenant Code found in the biblical book of Exodus. But I want to be clear right out of the gate for you listening, this isn't just, a dry history lesson.
No, not at all.
It's not an archaeology lecture about dusty rocks.
Because if we treat it like museum trivia, we completely miss the point of what these sources are arguing.
Exactly. The vision of our dive today is actually incredibly personal. Our sources argue that looking at these two ancient texts side by side reveals the stunning, world-altering brilliance of the Bible.
Yeah, it really does.
Like, if you are a Christian, understanding this specific historical contrast is meant to dramatically deepen your love for Christ and radically strengthen your daily devotion to him.
Because we're going to see how the Bible takes the fundamental legal assumptions of the ancient world.
Right.
Assumptions about human worth, about power, divine favor, and it just completely turns them upside down.
Completely. But to appreciate that revolution, I guess we have to start by thoroughly understanding the baseline, right?
Yeah, we have to understand the Code of Hammurabi first.
Because if we don't grasp what was considered normal and good in the ancient Near East, we can't possibly understand how shocking the biblical text is.
How utterly offensive and beautiful it truly is, exactly.
So I am looking at the notes on this stone pillar, and honestly, the physical description alone is intimidating.
Oh, it's a beast.
Set the scene for us. What exactly is this code, and where does it come from?
Okay, let's travel back to the old Babylonian period.
Okay.
We are talking roughly 1754 BC. King Hammurabi is the sixth king of the first Babylonian dynasty.
So a long time ago.
Very. And he isn't just some local ruler. He is a massive conqueror, a strategic empire builder, highly ambitious. He's unified a huge swath of Mesopotamia under his control.
Right.
And the code itself is preserved primarily on this massive basalt stele.
And a stele is essentially what? A giant stone monument, like a pillar?
Yes, exactly. A monumental stone slab erected for public viewing. And this particular stele is carved out of black basalt, which is this incredibly dense, dark, heavy volcanic rock.
Heavy duty.
Yeah, it stands about 7.5 feet tall. If you stand in front of it, it's in the Louvre in Paris today, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it looks a bit like a massive, dark index finger pointing toward the sky.
Wow.
It was discovered by French archaeologists much later, in 1901, in the ancient city of Susa, which is in modern-day Iran.
Wait, hold on. If Hammurabi was the king of Babylon, what was his giant stone pillar doing all the way over in Iran?
It's actually a great piece of historical irony.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it had been taken there as war plunder by an Elamite king centuries after Hammurabi died.
Oh, of course.
The Elamites conquered Babylon, saw this massive monument to Babylonian justice, and essentially said, well, we'll take that.
Just dragged it away.
Dragged it all the way back to their capital as a trophy. But on this giant black stone, inscribed in Akkadian cuneiform, are roughly 282 specific laws.
Akkadian cuneiform. I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen that, it is not a flowing, elegant script.
Not at all.
It looks like hundreds of tiny, sharp wedges and triangles just aggressively pressed into the stone.
Yeah, cuneiform literally means wedge-shaped. It was painstakingly carved into the basalt.
Must have taken forever.
Probably.
Yeah.
But before you even get to the text of the laws, there is a visual element at the very top of the stele that is absolutely crucial for understanding the entire Babylonian worldview.
Okay, what is it?
The top features a bas-relief carving, a sculpture carved right into the flat surface. It depicts King Hammurabi standing, respectfully receiving the laws from a seated figure.
And who is the seated figure?
That is Shamash, the Babylonian sun god, who is also the god of justice.
Okay.
And Shamash is handing Hammurabi a measuring rod and a ring.
Which mean what, exactly?
They are ancient symbols of building, order, and royal authority.
I see. So before anyone even reads a single wedge of text, the visual claim is already shouting at them like, I, Hammurabi, have absolute authority. I am getting this straight from the divine CEO.
That is the perfect way to look at it, because in the ancient Near East, law wasn't just practical legislation.
Like city council stuff today?
Right, like passing zoning ordinances. Law was a cosmic statement about the order of the universe.
Mm.
It was the ultimate tool for royal legitimation.
Wow.
The gods were viewed as the source of justice, but, and this is the foundational key to their whole society, that justice was mediated exclusively through the political power of the king.
So Hammurabi is presenting himself to his conquered territories as, what, the ideal divinely appointed shepherd.
Exactly.
I was actually reading through the translations of the prologue that wraps around the bottom of the stele, and honestly, the ego on this guy is just off the charts.
It's massive.
It's almost comical. He literally dictates into the stone, the king, who is preeminent among city kings, am I. My words are precious. My wisdom is unrivaled.
Very humble.
Right. He goes on and on about how the gods commissioned him to establish righteousness, to protect the weak, right wrongs. But then, and this is the crazy part, he ends the whole thing with these absolutely terrifying curses for anyone who dares to alter his monument.
He definitely covers all his bases.
Yeah.
He invokes the entire pantheon of Babylonian gods to bless those who obey his laws. But he asks those same gods to utterly destroy, curse, and obliterate anyone who defies him, or anyone who tries to take credit for his work.
Or any future king who tries to rewrite his ruling.
Yeah.
It's totally a protection racket. Like, obey me and the gods are happy, cross me and the sun god will blind you.
That's exactly how it functions.
But I want to look past the grand political rhetoric of him claiming to protect the weak, because when you actually dig into the 282 laws, you see how this society actually functioned on the ground.
Right, the reality of it.
The sources highlight that Hammurabi's empire was rigidly, legally divided into 3 distinct social classes.
Okay.
And this wasn't just unspoken social bias. This was codified law.
Yeah, it was baked into the very grammar of their justice system.
So what were the classes?
You had the Awilim.
Awilim.
Right. They were the free men, the elites, property owners, the upper class. Then you had the Mushanim, which were the commoners.
Yeah.
The free but lower class laborers. And finally, you had the wardom, the slaves.
Got it. Awilim, Mushinim, Wardom.
And justice in Babylon was explicitly, unapologetically class-based.
Break that down for us. What does class-based justice actually look like when someone commits a crime?
Okay, let's look at medical malpractice, which Hammurabi's code covers in brutal detail.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. If a surgeon operates on an Awilim, an elite free man, and the patient dies, the surgeon's hands are cut off.
Wow. Okay. That is severe.
Very severe. But if that same surgeon operates on a wardom, a slave owned by a commoner, and the slave dies, the surgeon doesn't lose his hands.
What happened?
He just has to replace the slave with another slave of equal value.
Are you kidding? So the punishment for taking a human life depends entirely on the economic value of the life that was taken.
Entirely. Your worth in this society and the amount of justice you were entitled to was entirely dependent on your social status. The law existed to protect the top of the pyramid.
And maintain the economic stability of the empire. I was trying to think of a way to conceptualize this, and it almost feels like a ruthless corporate structure, you know? Like an HR policy from a dystopian mega corporation.
Walk me through that. How so?
Well, think about what an HR department is ultimately designed to do. It loudly claims to be about fairness and protecting the employees, just like Hammurabi claiming to protect the weak.
Right, the PR spin.
Exactly. But in reality, the policy exists to keep the company running smoothly and to protect upper management from liability.
Ah, I see.
Like if an executive VP makes a multi-million-dollar mistake, the company covers it up, gives them a golden parachute, protects the brand. But if a warehouse worker makes a $100 mistake, fired on the spot, escorted out by security.
That is a highly accurate parallel.
The system has zero interest in the actual hearts or the equal inherent dignity of the employees. It only cares about utility and maintaining the hierarchy so the company doesn't collapse.
Yep. The gods in Hammurabi's world were essentially distant guarantors of order. They wanted the cosmic corporation to run smoothly, and the king was their CEO enforcing the policies.
Right.
Obedience from the average Babylonian citizen wasn't out of love. It wasn't about a personal, transformational relationship with the divine. It was entirely fear-based.
You obeyed because if you disrupted the order, the state machinery would crush you.
Precisely.
And it dictates how you view the people around you, too. Like, if I live in Babylon, I am viewing my neighbor not as a fellow human being with divine dignity, but purely through the lens of their status.
Yes.
If they are an Awilam and I am a Mushonim, I fear them, I flatter them. If they are a Wardum below me, I can just use them.
And if you hurt them, you just pull out your wallet and pay off their owner.
It's incredibly transactional.
And it's vital to grasp this reality.
Mm-hmm.
Because this hierarchical, fear-based, transactional approach to justice wasn't just a quirky Babylonian flaw.
Yeah.
No, this was the universally accepted reality of the ancient Near East. We find similar legal structures in Sumerian texts that predate Hammurabi, like the Code of Hammurabi, as well as later Assyrian and Hittite laws.
So it was everywhere.
Everywhere. No one in the ancient world was protesting this system. It was universally accepted that the gods loved the rich, the king was untouchable, and the poor were expendable.
Which makes what happens next in history feel like an absolute shockwave.
A total earthquake.
Because out of this specific cultural water, a group of slaves is pulled out of Egypt, brought into the desolate wilderness at the foot of Mount Sinai, and given their own set of laws.
Right.
So let's turn to our second mountain. What happens when Israel is given the Mosaic Law?
This is where the comparative analysis yields some truly profound insights. Let's look at the Covenant Code, which is the block of laws found in the biblical book of Exodus, spanning chapters 21 through 23.
Okay, Exodus 21 to 23.
The very first thing that shocks historical scholars when they lay Exodus next to Hammurabi is the format.
Really? The format.
Yeah, the Torah uses the exact same casuistic format as the Babylonian stele.
Casuistic, that refers to the if-then case law structure, right?
Yes. If a man does X, then Y shall be the consequence. It's case-based law. Exodus shares this same legal framework, and it even deals with many of the exact same gritty civil issues.
Like what?
Both codes have laws about what happens if an ox gores a neighbor, what happens if a builder's roof collapses, what happens if someone steals property. From a purely structural and linguistic standpoint, these two documents look like cousins.
So a critic might look at that and say, well, see, Moses just plagiarized the Babylonians. It's the same legal code, just stamped with a different god's name.
And people do make that argument constantly. But our sources point out that when you actually read the substance of the laws, that argument completely collapses.
Why?
Because while the format is borrowed, the theology driving the Exodus laws is completely alien to the ancient Near East. They are operating in two different moral universes.
That's fascinating. The sources break down these fundamental differences, and I want to dive deep into them, because this is where the brilliance really starts to shine.
Let's do it.
The first major difference they highlight is something they call redemption before command. I love this concept. Can you explain how this works in the texts?
Yeah, think back to the motive for obedience in Babylon.
Right.
The king gives the law to establish his empire and demands submission. You obey the law to earn your place in the society, to prove your worth, and to keep the gods from cursing you. Your obedience earns your security.
Very transactional.
Exactly. But look at how the Mosaic Law is introduced in Exodus 20, right before the Covenant Code begins. Before a single commandment is given, before God says, do not murder or do not steal, he opens with a statement of historical fact.
Okay.
He says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery.
Oh, wow. So God introduces himself as a savior before he introduces himself as a lawgiver.
Exactly. Grace precedes the law. The order of operations in the universe is completely reversed.
That is massive.
God doesn't stand at the top of Sinai, hand down a list of rules, and say, well, if you slaves can manage to obey this perfectly for a decade, I will come down and rescue you from Pharaoh.
Right. He rescues them first.
He redeems them entirely out of his own grace, power, and faithfulness to his covenant with Abraham.
They did nothing to earn the Exodus.
Nothing. And then, once they are free, the law is given, not as a mechanism to earn God's favor, but as a response to the grace they have already received. The law teaches a miraculously redeemed people how to live in holy communion with their Redeemer.
That shifts the entire psychological motivation for obedience. I mean, you aren't obeying out of a terrifying transactional fear of a distant sun god who is going to break your weapons and curse your crops.
Right.
You are obeying out of profound gratitude to a God who already saved you when you were at the absolute bottom of the global social hierarchy.
And that leads directly into the second major contrast our sources point out, the issues of authority and divine presence.
Right, let's go back to the visual at the top of Hammurabi's stele.
The carving.
Yeah, the sun god Shamash is sitting on his throne, handing the measuring rod of justice down to King Hammurabi, who then turns around and imposes it on the people. The king is the necessary middleman. But at Sinai, that dynamic is shattered.
It is entirely dismantled. In Israel, there is no king mediating the law.
But wait, what about Moses? Isn't Moses essentially acting as the Israelite version of Hammurabi? I mean, he's the guy going up the mountain and bringing the tablets down.
It's a fair question, but Moses is a mediator, certainly, but his role is entirely different. Moses is a prophetic mediator, not a monarch.
Okay, that's the difference.
Look at the power dynamics. Moses possesses no royal throne. He has no standing army to enforce his will. He builds no palace for himself. He doesn't even get to enter the promised land.
That's true.
He is simply a humble servant delivering the words. God is actually speaking directly to the assembly of the people from the mountain. There is no human king authoring this law or claiming my wisdom is unrivaled. God is the sole author.
And the physical spatial dynamics of where God is located change too, don't they?
Oh, massively.
Like the Babylonian gods are up in the heavens, far away, demanding the machine runs smoothly.
Yes, and contrast that with what God commands right after giving the covenant code. He commands the Israelites to build the tabernacle.
The tents.
Right. Why? So that he can dwell among his people. He pitches his tent right in the middle of their camp.
Right in the center.
This makes the religion fiercely relational. The law reflects the personal, holy character of a God who is intimately present, walking among them, not the cold calculations of a distant guarantor of cosmic order.
Okay, I want to move to the third major difference, and this is where I think people's minds are going to be blown.
Oh yeah, this is the big one.
Because it completely changes how we read one of the most famous and honestly often criticized phrases in the Bible. Let's talk about lex talionis.
The law of retaliation.
The famous eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
This is perhaps the most illuminating comparison we can make between the two mountains.
Because people quote an eye for an eye all the time, usually to argue that the God of the Old Testament was brutal, primitive, and obsessed with vengeance.
Oh, constantly.
Like, oh, the Old Testament is just violent tribalism. But when you actually lay Exodus side by side with Hammurabi, that argument totally falls apart.
It shatters completely when you look at the historical context.
Yeah.
As we noted, lex talionis, this concept of reciprocal justice, appears in both tests.
Okay.
Let's look at how Hammurabi handles it. Laws 196 through 201 deal specifically with destroying another man's eye or breaking his bone.
Rough stuff.
Yeah. Law 196 says, if an Owelim should blind the eye of another Owelim, they shall blind his eye. It is literal, proportional vengeance.
But the key word there is Owelim, the upper class.
Yeah.
It only applies if they're peers.
That is the crucial, horrifying caveat. If an upper-class man destroys the eye of another upper-class man, he loses his eye. But read the very next law, Law 198.
What does it say?
If that same upper-class man destroys the eye of a Wakonim, a commoner, he doesn't lose his eye. He just pays a fine of 1 mina of silver. And if he destroys the eye of a wardum, a slave, he pays half the slave's value to the slave's owner.
That is just low.
The law of retaliation is literal, but it is entirely subservient to the class hierarchy.
So it's an eye for an eye, unless your eye is considered more valuable than my eye. If you are rich, your eye is sacred. If I am poor, my eye is just a property damage fine.
Precisely. It reinforces the system of oppression. Now, turn the page to the Torah. Exodus 21 includes the exact same eye for eye, tooth for tooth vocabulary.
Okay.
But in Israel, the application is fiercely status blind. The law applies equally to the native-born Israelite and the wandering sojourner.
Really?
Leviticus 24 explicitly says, "You shall have the same rule for the sojourner and for the native." There is no sliding scale of justice based on your net worth, your lineage, or your social standing.
And from what I understand, the biblical command wasn't meant to be a manual for literal courtroom mutilation either, right?
No, not at all. In the biblical context, it functioned as a principle of equitable restitution, and crucially, as a strict limit on disproportionate
Oh,
vengeance.
limit.
Yes. In the ancient world, if a lower-class person knocked out the tooth of a wealthy man, the wealthy man might kill the poor man's entire family in retaliation.
Because his status was so much higher.
Right. The Torah steps in and says, no, the punishment must fit the crime and it can go no further.
Wow.
But far more importantly for our discussion, it establishes an absolute baseline of human worth. It declares, in a world that thought otherwise, that a poor laborer's eye is worth the exact same as a wealthy tribal chieftain's eye.
That is unbelievable when you think about the era.
It really is.
It's like God took the existing legal grammar of the ancient Near East. He used the casuistic if-then structure. He used the eye for an eye vocabulary that everyone already understood, but he used those exact same cultural words to write a completely different, world-altering story.
The sources phrase it perfectly. They say Israel didn't reject ancient Near Eastern law. They converted it.
Converted it. That's a fantastic way to phrase it.
They took the shell and filled it with divine dignity.
What Hammurabi used to stabilize elite power, the Torah uses to limit power and protect the vulnerable. It's a massive theological revolution hidden inside familiar legal formatting.
Think about it. If you were an ancient Babylonian or Egyptian merchant traveling through Israel and you read the Torah, the format would feel comfortable to you.
Right, you'd be like, oh, yes, case law, I know how this works.
Exactly. But the implications would completely blow your mind. The idea that a leader is subject to the same civil law as a peasant. Unthinkable. The idea that God actually cares how you treat a runaway slave.
Right. I was reading that Deuteronomy actually has a law that says if a slave runs away and comes to you, you cannot return him to his master. You have to let him live among you.
And in Hammurabi's Code?
Hiding a runaway slave gets you the death penalty.
Exactly. The Torah is a radical manifesto of human dignity masquerading as standard ancient legislation.
Okay, I love this. The contrast is incredibly sharp, and it makes me appreciate Exodus in a way I never have before. But here is the friction.
Let's hear it.
If the Torah is this beautiful, dignifying gift that protected the weak and established equal human dignity in a dark world, why isn't it the end of the story?
What do you mean?
I mean, if Sinai gave us this perfect moral vision of how society should operate, why do we need the rest of the Bible? Why the prophets? Why the New Testament? Why did things go so wrong for Israel if they had this perfect converted law?
That is the pivotal question of biblical theology, and it transitions us into understanding the fundamental limits of the law.
The limits.
Yes, because as revolutionary as the Mosaic Law was regarding social justice and revealing the true character of God, it shared one tragic, fatal limitation with Hammurabi's Code.
Which is?
It was external. It was written on stone.
And a rock, no matter how holy the words carved into it are, cannot change a human heart.
That's the tragic reality of human nature. Hammurabi could stabilize a society through the threat of violence. He could force outward compliance. But he couldn't renew a person's desires.
Right.
He couldn't make a cruel, greedy man into a kind, generous man. The Torah, because it reflects the perfect, blazing holiness of God, actually does something even more devastating than Hammurabi.
What's that?
It perfectly diagnoses the fatal human flaw.
It sets the standard.
It's a standard of perfect love for God and perfect, equitable love for your neighbor. And then it stands as a silent, unyielding witness that humanity, even a miraculously redeemed humanity like Israel, cannot keep it.
I mean, the Israelites have this beautiful law, and within weeks they are worshiping a golden calf.
Exactly.
It makes me think of an MRI machine.
An MRI. Okay, I'm tracking.
Think about it. An MRI is a brilliant, multi-million-dollar piece of medical technology. It is a gift to medicine. You slide into it, and it can show you with perfect, terrifying clarity exactly where the tumor is. It reveals the truth about your internal condition that you couldn't see otherwise. But you don't ask the MRI machine to perform the surgery.
No, you would die if you tried to heal yourself with the diagnostic tool.
Right. It diagnoses the disease perfectly, but it has zero power to cure it. The Torah is the MRI of the human soul.
That is a profoundly apt analogy. The law was never meant to be the surgeon. It was always the diagnostic tool.
Wow.
And our sources point out that this limitation drastically shapes one's view of God and oneself. The ancient Near Eastern codes, the Hammurabis of the world, taught that favor must be earned through outward compliance.
Manage the rules well enough and you're fine.
Right. The Torah taught that God is intensely personal, unimaginably holy, and that his justice is an expression of his very character. But because he is so holy and we are so internally flawed, the law naturally points beyond itself.
It creates a tension.
A tension that screams for a savior, a surgeon, to use your metaphor.
And I'm sure you're wondering the exact same thing I am right now as we talk about this tension.
Which is lost.
If the Torah was this beautiful, dignifying gift that we just spent 20 minutes praising, if it elevated human dignity in a way Babylon never did, why does the Apostle Paul sound so incredibly harsh about it in the New Testament?
Yes.
I mean, you read his letters to the Galatians or the Romans, and it sometimes sounds like Paul is saying the law is a curse, a burden we desperately needed to escape. How do we reconcile the historical beauty of Sinai with Paul's critique?
This exact tension is the crucible of Christian theology. It is what the New Testament writers were wrestling with in real time.
Okay.
To understand Paul, we have to realize he didn't view the law itself as a mistake. Paul was a Pharisee. He loved the Torah.
Right, he was an expert in it.
In Romans 7, he explicitly defends it, saying the law is holy and the commandment is holy and righteous and good. The problem wasn't the law. The problem was sin, utilizing the good law to bring death.
So what was Paul actually attacking when he sounds so harsh?
Paul's harshness is directed at legalism. He is attacking the human attempt to use the law as a ladder to climb up to God. The Pharisees of Paul's day had essentially turned the Torah back into Hammurabi's code.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they turned it into a transactional system of status. Like, if I keep these rules perfectly, I'm spiritually elite, and I can look down on the sinners and the Gentiles.
So they created a new Owilim and Mushinim out of the Bible.
Exactly. And Paul is saying, no, you missed the entire point of the MRI. It was supposed to show you your need for grace, not give you a checklist to prove your superiority.
That makes so much sense. So the New Testament writers viewed the law as a divinely designed shadow waiting for the sun to rise.
Yes.
Which brings us to the canonical climax of our deep dive. I want to spend some time looking closely at how the different parts of the New Testament view the Mosaic Law in light of Jesus Christ.
Let's do it.
Because this is where the massive arc from a black stone in Babylon to the foot of Sinai finally lands. Let's start with Paul, since we are already talking about him.
Let's look at a specific text. Romans 10.4. Paul writes, Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. Now, in English, the word end sounds like termination.
Yeah, like closing a book and throwing it in the trash.
Right. But the Greek word Paul uses there is telos.
Telos, that's where we get words like telescope or teleology.
Exactly. Telos doesn't mean abolition. It means the goal, the climax, the intended destination. The finish line of a race is its telos. Paul isn't saying Christ simply tore up the law like a bad contract. He is saying Christ is what the law was pointing at the entire time.
He's the destination the map was leading to.
Yes. The law demanded perfect righteousness and love. Christ lived it and provided it. The law pronounced a just curse on human sin. Christ bore that exact curse on the cross. He fulfills its purpose so completely that the believer is no longer living under its condemnation.
Okay, that's Paul. What about the Gospel of John? Our sources highlight a really interesting contrast in John's prologue.
Yes. John 1:17, it says, the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Now, John is clearly setting up a contrast here. But again, it is not bad Old Testament versus good New Testament. It's shadow versus reality.
Because there was grace in the giving of the law, as we already discussed. Right. God saved them from Egypt first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the ultimate realization of that grace arrives in Jesus. Later in John's Gospel, Jesus does something profound. He gives what he calls a new commandment to his disciples, to love one another.
Right.
But he defines that love not just by the baseline standards of Sinai, but by the cross. He says, just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another.
He raises the bar.
He takes the moral vision of the Torah, which was already revolutionary compared to Hammurabi, and he radicalizes it entirely through his own ultimate self-sacrifice.
It's like the Mosaic Law is an incredibly detailed architectural blueprint.
Ooh, blueprint.
Yeah, like a blueprint is a brilliant thing. It shows you exactly where the walls go, where the foundation is laid. But Christ is the actual completed house. You don't try to live inside the blueprint once the house is built. You'd look ridiculous sitting in an empty field on a piece of blue paper when it's raining.
Right. I love that image.
But the blueprint wasn't wrong. It wasn't a mistake. It was just pointing to the real thing. And once you walk into the house, once you see the architecture of grace in Christ, you can look back at the blueprint and see how perfectly it predicted the shape of what was coming.
And that blueprint analogy perfectly captures the theology of the book of Hebrews, which is the next major source text we need to look at.
How perfect.
The author of Hebrews explicitly calls the Old Testament priesthood, the sacrifices, the temple rituals, he calls all of it a shadow of heavenly things.
And Christ is the substance casting the shadow.
He is the heavenly substance. Hebrews argues that Christ is the better priest, the better sacrifice, the mediator of a better covenant.
Better in every way.
The entire letter is a desperate warning to Jewish Christians who were facing persecution and were tempted to go back to the safety of the old rituals. The author is saying, do not return to the law for your justification.
Don't go back.
Right. To go back to trusting in animal blood and stone temples after the Son of God has come is to regress from the reality back to the shadow. It is, using your analogy, abandoning the warm, completed house to go stand in the rain on the blueprint.
So we have Paul, John, and Hebrews focusing on fulfillment and the danger of treating the law as a means of salvation. But what about the rest of the New Testament?
You mean like James and Peter?
Yeah, the letters of James, Peter, John's epistles. How do they handle the legacy of Sinai? Because James, for instance, talks a lot about obedience and works.
The general epistles focus heavily on the ethical, lived-out results of this fulfillment. How does a person living in the house actually behave?
Right.
James calls the fulfillment of the law the royal law of love. In James chapter 2, he quotes Leviticus 19 directly. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But look at the context in which he quotes it. He's confronting the church because they are showing partiality.
Partiality, like playing favorite.
Yes. A rich man with gold rings and fine clothing comes into the assembly, and they give him the best seat. A poor man in shabby clothes comes in, and they tell him to sit on the floor by their feet.
Oh, wow.
James is absolutely furious about this.
Wait, let's pause and think about that scenario in light of Hammurabi. What the church in James 2 is doing is exactly what Hammurabi's code demanded.
Yes. You see the connection.
Hammurabi's entire system of the Owelim and the Mushunim was built on mandatory partiality. It required treating the rich man better. It was illegal not to.
Yep.
And James is looking at these early Christians and saying, what are you doing? In the kingdom of Christ, slipping back into a class-based system of human value is a fundamental betrayal of the royal law.
That is the exact friction. James and the general epistles constantly hammer home that obedience to God's moral vision, loving the poor, caring for the widow, refusing to play favorites, is the necessary evidence of a radically transformed heart, not the basis of your salvation.
The canonical trajectory here is just breathtaking when you step back and look at the whole map.
It really is.
We move from Hammurabi in Babylon, where the concept of law is used to maintain imperial power and crush the weak, to Moses at Sinai, where law is used to form a set-apart holy people and establish baseline human dignity, to Christ, who fulfills the impossible demands of the law by forming a redeemed humanity empowered by the Holy Spirit.
The law moves from a list of external rules carved on a black basalt rock in Babylon, to rules carved on tablets of stone in the desert, to a living reality internalized and written on the fleshy tablets of the human heart by the Spirit of God.
That is a massive, beautiful theological arc.
Jesus does not abolish the Torah's moral vision regarding justice and the dignity of the vulnerable. He universalizes it. He expands it to the whole world. And he definitively joins perfect justice to perfect mercy at the cross.
He took the curse of the broken law upon himself so that we could inherit the blessing of his perfect obedience.
Yes.
So what does this actually mean for us today? We have traveled a long way.
A very long way.
From an ancient stele covered in curses in 1754 BC, to a desert mountain shaking with thunder, to the cross of Christ in the 1st century. What does this massive amount of history and theology mean for you, listening to this right now, waking up tomorrow morning, drinking your coffee, getting in your car, and trying to follow Jesus? Let's bring this down to the ground level.
Moving from historical transaction to daily transformation.
Exactly.
The sources we've reviewed outline several incredibly practical daily implications for the Christian. First, on a purely intellectual level, there's a powerful apologetic value here.
Apologetic meaning a defense of the faith.
Right. Knowing this history defends the moral distinctiveness of Scripture. When you encounter critics, and you will, in college classrooms and books on social media who confidently claim that the Bible is just another ancient Near Eastern code, or that Moses just plagiarized Babylonian myths, you now possess the historical knowledge to know that is fundamentally false.
I mean, they share some formatting and vocabulary. Yes, they lived in the same hemisphere.
But the Bible represents a complete theological and moral revolution. The comparison proves the biblical text isn't just a passive echo of its violent ancient culture. It is a divine revelation intentionally cutting against the grain of human empire. It gives you profound intellectual confidence in the text you are reading.
But beyond just defending the Bible intellectually, how does this contrast deeply change how a Christian relates to God pastorally, on a heart level?
It changes everything about our internal motivation. Think about the psychological state of an ancient Babylonian. If you view God the way Hammurabi viewed Shamash, you will live your entire life in constant low-level terror.
You're just waiting for the hammer to fall.
Always. You will view your entire religious life as a transaction. You will think, I need to do my daily quiet time, I need to volunteer at church, I need to put money in the offering plate so that God won't crush my life, give me disease, or break my weapons. It is a religion of appeasement.
But the biblical gospel fundamentally short-circuits that transaction.
It destroys it. The gospel says the holy God of the universe came down, stepped into the human timeline, bore the curse of the broken law for you, and brought you into his own family as a fully adopted heir.
Wow!
He redeemed you before you ever obeyed a single command. Therefore, radical gratitude completely replaces terrified appeasement as the engine of your moral life.
You don't obey to get God to love you. You obey because he already does, and you want to be near him.
Exactly.
That is so incredibly freeing. If I'm operating out of fear, I'm just trying to manage God. I'm trying to pull the right levers so he leaves me alone. But I'm operating out of gratitude. I actually want to know him.
Right.
And that inward shift directly impacts our outward view of others, doesn't it? How we treat the people in our lives.
It has to. It is the inescapable consequence of grace. Under the logic of Hammurabi, you view your neighbor strictly through the lens of status and utility. You look at people and subconsciously ask, what can you do for me? If the person is above you in the corporate hierarchy or socially more popular, you fear them and flatter them. If they are below you, if they can't offer you anything, you ignore them or use them.
Because that's the Awilum and the Wardum playing out in the 21st century.
Exactly. We still do it. But Christians, because they have been saved purely by unmerited grace, are called to view every single neighbor, regardless of their economic status, their political background, or their utility to us as covenant partners, bearing equal, divine, unshakable dignity.
This brings up a really convicting point from the sources about cultural discernment. They talk about the danger of modern Hammurabi-like legalism creeping into our own hearts and even into our churches.
We have to be vigilant because the fallen human heart naturally defaults to Babylon. We love it.
We do.
We naturally gravitate toward transactional religion and social hierarchy because it gives us a sense of control. When a church culture divorces the heavy demands of God's moral law from the breathtaking beauty of God's redemption, it slowly devolves into a Hammurabi culture.
A culture of performance.
Yes. When we start treating people in our ministries or our families or our workplaces merely as units of productivity, when we value them for what they can produce rather than seeing them as broken souls in desperate need of the same grace we need, we're reverting back to the code of the black stone. We're resurrecting the steel.
Man, let me pose a reflective challenge to you listening right now. Let's really be honest with ourselves. How often do we secretly prefer Hammurabi's system?
It's a tough question.
Think about it. A simple transactional checklist is really easy to manage. If I do X, Y, and Z, if I don't drink, if I go to church, if I vote the right way, I earn my status. I am the spiritual Awilum.
Right.
And the dark, secret benefit of that system is that I get to look down on the people who didn't do the checklist. It feels safe. It feeds my pride.
It's intoxicating.
It is. We often prefer that rigid, class-based legalism over the messy, humiliating, status-destroying reality of God's grace. Because grace says you bring absolutely nothing to the table. Grace says the person you naturally despise and look down on is offered the exact same royal inheritance as you, bought by the exact same blood. That offends the inner Hammurabi in all of us.
That is the crux of the entire issue. Realizing the radical leveling nature of biblical grace should absolutely shatter that default mode of superiority. It forces us to stop and ask ourselves, am I building my daily life, my self-worth, and my relationships on a foundation of human power and performance? Or am I building it on divine redemption and presence?
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's tie these ancient stones and these massive theological concepts back together. We have covered over 4,000 years of history today.
Let's summarize the journey we've taken. We started by looking at Hammurabi's code, and we saw how the ancient world used law as a blunt instrument to maintain imperial power, to protect the elite, and to codify human inequality. Then we moved to Mount Sinai. We saw how Moses and the Covenant Code taught Israel how law forms a holy people. God used the familiar legal grammar of the day to tell an entirely new story, a story where grace comes first, where God dwells with the broken, and where every human possesses equal dignity.
And then we followed that trajectory all the way to the New Testament. We saw how Jesus Christ is the telos, the final climax and fulfillment of the law. He moved the moral vision of God from external stone tablets to an internalized reality empowered by the Holy Spirit, forming a newly redeemed humanity bound together not by class, but by self-sacrificial love.
Reading the Bible alongside Hammurabi doesn't flatten Scripture into the dust of ancient history. It doesn't make it less special. It does the exact opposite. It highlights its absolute, undeniable theological brilliance. It acts as a foil that makes the diamond of the gospel shine even brighter.
It deepens our gratitude for the grace we've been shown. It shows us that the God of the universe didn't just look down at our brokenness and send us a slightly better HR policy.
No, he didn't.
He came down and gave us himself. So I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to ponder on your own today. Think about a relationship you have right now that is strained, or think about a personal standard you are desperately trying to meet, or maybe even a personal failure you are currently wrestling with in the quiet of your own mind. Look closely at how you are handling it.
Just observe your own heart.
Exactly. Are you dealing with yourself and others using Hammurabi's ancient code operating out of transactional status, constant measurement, and fear of punishment? Or are you operating from Christ's new covenant of unmerited grace, equal dignity, and internalized love?
It really is the fundamental choice between the two mountains, isn't it?
It is. Are you standing in the cold shadow of the royal throne, frantically calculating your worth and hoping the sun god doesn't strike you? Or are you standing at the foot of Sinai, realizing that the God who rescues slaves has already come all the way down to bring you home?